Hello, I'm Gemma Star, and welcome to another episode of Heart Warriors. This is a series I've been inspired and guided to do thanks to my connection with Katajuda, which is the sacred masculine site in Central Australia, very close to Uluru being the sacred feminine site. What Katajuda has asked me to do is to give a platform to the masculine. The masculine needs to be heard. The masculine needs to share his experience, his insights, his wisdom with other men on the journey, and also with us women who need to understand men and their journey, their pain, their joys, their challenges. And today I have a wonderful guest called Michael Lauria. He's another Aussie. It is my greatest pleasure to welcome Michael to the show. Hello, Michael Lauria. Welcome to Heart Warriors.
Hi, Gemma. Thank you so much for inviting me. I really appreciate it.
Oh, my absolute pleasure. Where about in Australia are you?
I'm in Melbourne in Australia, so we're actually in the Yarra Valley of Melbourne in Australia. So it's just beautiful here. We love it.
Oh, beautiful. Would
Yep.
you like to give us an insight into the man you are today? And then we'll be able to jump back and see how you got there.
The man I am today. Okay, cool.
Yeah.
So the man, who is Michael Lauria right now? So I would say Michael Lauria now is a confident, self-assured, decisive man who holds himself to high standards, very clear on what his core values are, has a very well-defined purpose for his life, and actualizes himself in each and every moment in every way that he possibly can.
Wow, that's amazing. And what are those core values?
So my core values are service, contribution, and purpose.
That's wonderful. I'll remember those and ask you again, and we'll get into those. But
Sure.
let's go back and see how you got to be the man you are today. Can you take us back to a significant point in your younger years when something shifted for you?
How young do we want to go?
Wherever you
Or
want to
how old?
take us.
Okay, all right, no worries. So I would say that the most significant, there's lots of significant points in our lives, but I would say the one that really is front and center for me is, I would say, when I was smack bang in the middle of divorce with two children, and I was in my early 30s, so I would have been 32, 33, somewhere there. And just prior to getting to this point, which I'll explain to you in a moment, I hadn't seen my children for quite a while. So it had been, 18 months. And in amongst there'd only been maybe one or two contact points, if that, from what I can remember. And there was a lot of contributing factors to that. There was, partly I've got to take responsibility for who I was back then as well, and how I kind of behaved and responded to the world and the environment around me. There was that part of it. There was definitely some parental alienation involved there as well. Plus there was family court, and there was financial struggle, and there was job loss, and there was eviction from my property, and there was bankruptcy. And there were all of these things that just compounded on top of each other over a period of, let's say, 2 years or thereabouts. And the previous 3 months or so prior to this event, which I'll explain in a second, I was also on antidepressants, sleeping pills, anti-anxiety medication, and I'd also resorted to alcohol as well. So there was this 2 weeks at the tail end of all of this where I was literally at home drinking, taking sleeping pills to try and sleep. I wasn't really eating much, but I was drinking a lot of alcohol. I'd just gotten a letter of eviction from my landlord. I had to declare bankruptcy about 2 weeks before that. Again, hadn't seen my children, and the court, family court that I attended, let's say it was about 2 or 3 weeks before that, meant that I wasn't going to see them for another 4 to 6 months after that. So all of this culminated, Gemma, into this experience where, one Sunday morning I'm on the edge of my bed with a bottle of alcohol and a bottle of wine and antidepressants and sleeping pills and like heaps of them. And I was about to take my own life. And so I didn't, obviously, which is good. And that was the catalyst point for me to really look in the mirror and become aware of who I'd become and how I'd allow myself to descend into my own personal hell and chaos for a period of time. And then that was I would say that's the springboard for the journey that I went on from there to become who I am now, which is
Well, you
obviously,
had it all there, and I mean,
I
I
did.
you had the whole lot at once. Wow. So let's unpack this. The thing I first want to get into is how it feels for a father to be alienated from his children.
Look, I've spoken a lot about this on many podcasts, especially early on, and I want to share something about this. There is definitely elements of parental alienation in our society and worldwide society. Okay, and there's so many reasons for that. Um, there are definitely women who become resentful and bitter, and they will just alienate their children from their father, whether it's from a place of resentment and revenge, whether it's from a place of just wanting more money, using the children as leverage for more money for child support. Both of those existed in my experience, but I can't also, in all good conscience, say that I didn't contribute to that process, because there were periods of time over those 2 or 3 years where my children shouldn't have been around me, right? Because I was because of everything that I was going through. Like I was in debt the whole time, trying to pay the mortgage on the family home, private school fees, try to support my family in the best way that I could, and also support myself. So there was always financial struggle. I was always living on credit cards, and that's eventually what led to the bankruptcy. And I could see that coming, but I had this thing within me. It's like, no, Michael, you've got to do the right thing. You've got to do the right thing. You've got to look after your family, your kids, et cetera, right? And so I sacrificed myself in many ways in order to do that. And men do that, right? But we don't take responsibility for the fact that we make those choices. And that eventually gets us to this point where I was, which is bankruptcy. So, you know, there's definitely that element there as well. And then, of course, when you're struggling financially, stress levels go up, anxiety levels go up if you don't know how to manage your state very well. And at that point, I hadn't done any personal development at all. I think the only thing that I did was maybe read one of Tony Robbins' early books, and that was about it. So I had no sense of self. I have no self-awareness. I had no ability really either to emotionally regulate myself, nor did I understand that I was the creator of my reality, nor did I understand that everything that happened externally to me in my environment wasn't necessarily the problem. It was how I was either reacting or responding to it. So this was a Michael that did not take responsibility at all for anything. It was always blame and fault and externalizing and projecting. And so you can imagine then that led to immense annoyance, which turned into frustration. And the frustration turns into anger. When you're unregulated, the frustration turns into anger. And so then I started yelling at my children. And I'm ashamed to say I smacked my children a couple of times when I was incredibly angry as a result of the frustration of my experience. And I felt powerless as well. And I could feel my children disconnecting more and more and more, even before this started, and they were being taken more and more and more. And there were instances where I would pick them up and not be allowed to pick them up for whatever reason that would be. And of course, this all adds to the experience. And so I would say that, it's easy for me to be a victim in talking to parental alienation and how that was the cause of everything. And I used to do that, to be honest. Early on, when I would do podcast interviews, I would paint myself as the victim of my experience and the victim of my ex-wife and the victim of the family court and the victim of everything. But truth be told, I would say that if I had have responded and reacted very differently in those moments and had some of the knowledge that I have now, then I wouldn't have helped to co-create that experience of parental alienation.
Michael, can you remember the point where you shifted from being that victim to being the creator of your reality? And what was behind that shift in perspective?
So I would say it was in that moment that I described to you when I almost took my own life. That's a good word, perspective, because I really got up off my bed and I'm like, who have I become? And I went to the bathroom, I looked in the mirror, and it gave me a new perspective, because I'd never imagined that I would descend that far. I'd never imagined because I was such a proud man, such a and I come from an Italian background, so there's a lot of pride there, and there's a lot around how you show up in the world, how you present your image to the world.
La
And so
bella
when,
figura.
pardon?
La bella figura.
Yes, that's exactly right. That's exactly right. Exactly. And so when you look in the mirror and you see a sunken face, you know, unshaved, like, and I'm not talking about this, I'm talking about unshaved because I was shaving back then, and a sunken face, dark rings under my eyes. You know, I hadn't showered for, it's disgusting, Gemma. I hadn't showered for a couple of weeks, and I was just drinking, and I think the only thing that I ate was pizza, and that was because it could get delivered. I didn't have to go anywhere, you know, and it was cheap. Domino's pizza, $9 for a large pizza.
Yeah, yeah.
So that was my experience, and I would say I saw myself in a different light in that moment, and it was that was the springboard. It was that was really the catalyst for an understanding and realizing and seeing who I'd become, and not being able to lie to myself anymore, because it was in that moment that I realized that blame and fault had gotten me nowhere. In fact, it had gotten me worse than nowhere. And maybe responsibility, maybe if I started taking ownership of myself and my choices, then perhaps I would create a different experience. And so in that moment, even that was an experiment, because I'd never really taken responsibility for myself at any point in my life.
Can you remember that point, standing in front of the mirror, and articulate the emotional state and the feelings you were going through? Because from my experience, men have problems with this. And I think being able to actually articulate the feeling and the emotional state is one step closer to awareness. Can you do that?
Yeah, I would
Please?
agree. I wouldn't have been able to describe it back then, but I can certainly
No.
describe it now. So
Okay.
back then there was a lot of guilt around how I'd behaved. There was a lot of shame around who I'd become. There was also that constant, see, when you're in that space as a man, you have this constant feeling of, there's this undercurrent of hopelessness and helplessness, and you feel powerless in many ways. And I still felt that way, even though I was having this epiphany, if you like. I still felt largely hopeless and helpless to change my circumstances. I knew I had to do something different, but I would say that the primary emotions that I was feeling were guilt, shame, helplessness, and this big question mark was, well, what now? I know I've come to this place, but what now? And so, yeah, for me, that was, Jordan Peterson says, clean your room. That's the first thing you should do before you go and try and solve the world's problems or your bigger life problems. And this was well before Jordan Peterson, but I remember turning from the mirror and looking out into my bedroom, and it was just like my bed hadn't been made. There was clothes everywhere. It was just, it was like a teenage boy's room, right? And so I thought, well, I'm just going to, just that one thing, I'll just tidy my room. I'll clean my room up, wash my clothes, went into the kitchen. I'm like, wash the dishes, vacuum the floor. I'm still half drunk at this point, but I'm trying to put myself back together in some way and seeing what could work.
Michael, if there's any men watching this that are at that point now, standing in front of the mirror, or might take something that you say now and remember at the point where they do stand in front of the mirror, what can you say to them?
What can I say to them, to that man? I would say, and it's difficult for a man in that place to hear this, but I would say that your experience of life right now is not representative of what you have the capability and potential to create. Right? That's what I would say to him now. But I'm also well aware of the fact that when you're talking to a man in that state, that's not something he's always open to hearing.
Okay, so what would you advise his next step be? If he says, Michael, okay, what do I do next?
So the first thing is to take control of the things that you can take control of, which is what I guess I did unconsciously. And that is tidy up the parts of your life that you can access, tidy up the parts of your life that are right there in front of you that are obviously in chaos, and then begin the journey towards actualizing something that feels like potential. But again, like, it's these little small steps, Gemma. You can't go from where I was to who I am now. That's been a journey of 17 years. Okay, so it's not a short journey and it's not an easy journey, but I will say that those first steps are around what can I control right now? What can I change right now? What can I do right now to create some kind of positive feeling, positive change in my life to help me feel like there's something that I have control over. There's something that I can change that creates a positive outcome. And
Nice.
the easy things are just tidy up your surroundings, right?
Mm.
Bring your environment into order. Go from chaos to order, especially in your environment. And then once you've done that in your immediate environment, then expand that circle outwards and go, okay, what can I start to begin to look at now? And it's like my job, my relationships, my financial situation. And these start to get bigger and bigger and bigger until all of a sudden you look back 3-6 months later and it's like, wow, it's just those baby steps, those little things that I feel I can do now to create cells of recognition for the experience of doing something that creates a positive outcome. And then when I get
Mm.
that, when I get those cells of experience, cells of recognition for the experience of doing that, then I'm motivated to do the next thing and the next thing and the next thing. And that
I love
becomes an
that,
ongoing
Michael.
journey.
I'm getting the image of all being layers of ourselves, you know, ourself and then our room and our house and our family, our relationships, our community, and out into the world. So yeah, I love that. So what, you cleaned up your room, and how did you then clean up like your relationships, the relationship you had with your children, the relationship you had with your ex-wife, getting out of debt? Can we move forward and see how you did approach this cleanup?
Yeah. Okay. Cool. So the next steps for me were my children. After that, and this was, oh, okay. Actually, no. There was my house. Tidy that up, and then it's like, okay, I need to sort out this eviction problem because I need somewhere to live, and I don't have any money to go and pay bond and 4 weeks rent. And part of that means getting a job again, you know, because I'd lost my job because of my alcohol problem, and so I went to, so the next step was, oh, I'll sort out my living situation first. And then it's like, oh, I actually turned up to the real estate agent on the front the next morning, right? So I had to sober myself up, shave, and, you know, just get to the real estate. So I did that and I explained my situation to the property manager. And she looked at me and she said, Michael, give me one moment, please. And she had me in a separate room. Anyway, she made a phone call. She came back and she said, give me can you wait for 15, 20 minutes? I said, yep, sure, no worries. So I sat there and waited. All of a sudden there's a knock on the door and there's this guy that comes in to the room and he said, you're Michael. And I said, yep. And he said, I'm your landlord. And he said, I've just been told about your circumstances. And he said, can you just stand up for a second? I stood up and he gave me a hug. And this always like starts to bring a bit of a tear to my eye because there was this man who didn't really know me from a bar of soap. I was over 2 months behind in rent. He had a mortgage to pay. He had a family to support as well. And he gave me a hug and he said, you know what, Michael, I've just been told about your experience and why you're so overdue in rent. He said, if I gave you another 3 months, do you think you might be able to catch up with rent and at least get, you know, to the point where you've paid your arrears and you're up to date? And I said, I appreciate that so much. I said, yes, I will do that. I will make sure that happens. And so I know, Gemma, I know, right? There's this one man, because if he hadn't been compassionate towards me, and this is why compassion is one of the 7 standards of men that I write about in my book, Forging Excalibur. So because of this experience, if he didn't show me compassion and empathy, who knows what the next steps would have been for me, because I wouldn't have had a place to live. And of course, when you're fronting up to family court wanting to see your children and you don't have a place for them to live, you don't get to see them, right? Or that you don't get to spend time with them. So that was that experience. And I'm like, thank you so much. Next thing I did, I rang up my previous employer. He'd fired me 2 months before.
Mhm.
And I said, I know it's been a while. Can I just come in and see you, please? And he said, yeah, sure, no worries. And I went in and I sat down with him. I explained the whole situation. I said, this is why I got to the point that I was at. And I'm so sorry. And I should have taken responsibility, but I would really appreciate it if you could help me out. And so he gave me my job back on the spot. He said, if you can promise me that you will stay off the alcohol, that you will never do that stuff again, that you'll turn up, you'll come. Because the whole problem was I was drinking the night before and then not waking up in time to go to work. And so I was late every single day for ages, and I wasn't performing well at work because I was intoxicated most of the time, or at least had a horrible hangover and a headache. And he said, prior to you drinking, you were my best performer. Can you go back to that again? I said, yep, absolutely. So I got 3 months extra to cover my rent, to come back up to date with rent so I could stay where I was living, got my job back, and that was the beginning stages, right? So when I started having an income again, I could take care of my rent and my living expenses. And then it was about turning my attention after that moment. I'm like, okay, cool. What do I need to do for family court? What do I need to do to see my children again? And for me, it was about presenting myself in court much, much better than what I had, taking responsibility. And so it was about 6 weeks later when I got to go back to court again. And I remember standing there, and there was these horrible things in affidavits back and forth between my ex-wife and I, right? It was just not nice. She was saying things, I was reacting, and it was just not good. And the magistrate was there, and he said, I don't know what to do here. He said, it's just, and he said, the way you're presenting yourself in court, the things that have been said in affidavits, I don't know what to do. And it was in that moment I said, look, I haven't taken responsibility for myself up until this point. I said, some of the things in the affidavit are lies. Some of the things in her affidavit are true. I haven't behaved well. But I said, I'm trying to change my life and turn things around. I would really like an opportunity to do that and to see my children have a good relationship with them. And so that was a turning point as well, because I showed up differently in family court. But it was still a process, Gemma. Like, it wasn't, my ex-wife and I don't speak, and we haven't spoken for a long time. And when we do talk, she's just really angry, very angry because of some of the things that I've said and some of the things that I'd done back then as well, and how I'd behaved. And I didn't respect her at the level at which she deserved to be respected. And it was all about seeing my children, and everything else took a back seat, including her needs and her ability to share how she was feeling about the situation and what was happening between us. I didn't allow space for that. So, of course, over time that builds into resentment, and resentment can sometimes build into hate in some people. And that's what perpetuated within her. So I was then growing as a person and becoming more self-aware, and she remained back in that state. And so it's very difficult to create connection. I have tried 2 or 3 times over the years, but it just doesn't happen. And as a result of how she felt all of those years, for all of those years, and continues to feel, the parental alienation continued regardless of what I did and regardless of what I tried to do and how much I grew as a man. It continued, and I don't have a relationship with my adult children now, and they're 20. Yeah, they're 20 and 24. So I always hold hope that if it's meant to be, then it will be. And perhaps when they get a little bit older and they develop more of a sense of self and have a sense of independence, and you never know, maybe they'll see something online. I'm quite prolific online, so they might see something on TikTok, YouTube, Instagram, Facebook, whatever. You never know. And they'll see me and they might want to reach out. Who knows?
Michael, let's just say they're watching now. What would you like to say to them?
I would say exactly the same thing that I've said to them in my email that I sent them a little while ago, which is I apologize for who I was. I didn't know any better. I went on an intentional journey towards becoming a better man and subsequently a better father. And I understand that they're hurt. I understand they feel like they were not approved of by me, and that I love them, and that I'm always here. My door and my heart is always open to recreate a new relationship as opposed to continue the old ones.
Beautiful. Well, I wish you all the best with that, because you've created so many beautiful changes in your life that, we will wait for that next chapter. What I'm interested to know, Michael, is it seems like you had these beautiful openings with your landlord, with your job. What do you attribute that to? were you already aware that you were creating your reality, or what did you just put it down to good luck?
At the time, I'm like, whoa, that was. I remember thinking to myself, wow, that was lucky. How
Mm,
lucky, right? Am I to have um, a good landlord and a good boss at
mm,
my at work, right? But over the years, I've learned to realize um, that there's no such thing as luck. You know, we create our experience of life, and I would say that that was the initial. They were the initial stages of me accepting full responsibility for myself, my life, and the results that I was getting. And I always say to people, if things are not going the way that you want them to go,
mm.
first first observe yourself and ask this question: am I taking responsibility for this, or am I deflecting responsibility somewhere else? Am I bypassing responsibility and not understanding that I'm the architect of my life and I can create my results, and the future that I want to live is totally in my control. You know, I can create that experience in each and every moment by taking responsibility, by being very clear on what I value, by being honest, by being within integrity, by having the courage to show up and speak my truth and say the things that need to be said. And, you know, when we start to do that, we start to experience very different results in life.
Have you got any practical tools, books, insights, or material that you give yourself that you can share with any man watching that just needs some practical tools to take this step with, of getting understanding his responsibility in it all?
Yep. Well,
Not blame, but responsibility.
absolutely. Yeah, they're very different, aren't they? So it's not about blaming ourselves and berating ourselves for whatever's happened. It's about taking responsibility right now and then changing your experience of life and your results. So I would say that the number one book that I would say, I would be remiss in saying, in not mentioning Forging Excalibur, right? I'd be
Please
remiss.
do. Please
So
do
my,
mention it now if it's suitable. Yep.
all right. So my book, Forging Excalibur, is I wrote that in March of 2019. And I'd gotten to this point on my journey where I'm like, I'm sure I have some knowledge, some wisdom that I can share now. And I wonder if I could put it all together and package it up in an easy to read, practical guidebook in some way that could help men with the fundamentals, the basic fundamentals of personal development. And that is the relationship between the conscious and the subconscious minds, how we're programmed, how we're conditioned, how we're indoctrinated, right? And then begin to then craft an experience for them where they can go through the book, and men can read this book, and it's a very foundational process where it's like, this is how you have become who you've become. These are the steps in the process. This is how a boy is formed into a man, generally speaking. And this is, excuse me, how you can recraft and reform yourself, just like a hunk of metal goes on a journey to become a sword, right? It gets thrust into the fire, and that's adversity. It comes out and it's hammered and shaped and folded, this piece of metal, and it goes on that process time and time and time and time again. And each time it strengthens. Each time the metal strengthens and is more it's stronger, right? Until it gets to a point where it becomes something useful. And this is what we have to do. We have to craft and shape ourselves into who we wish to become. So I would say Forging Excalibur helps men with the fundamentals of personal development, the foundational training that you need to at least understand yourself and understand how responsibility and holding yourself to high standards can change your results and your experience of life. That would be my first recommendation. But equal to that would be a book by Napoleon Hill called Think and Grow Rich.
Mhm.
And so people hear that title and they go, "Oh, you know, it's all about money." It's actually not, right?
Mm.
Even it's about the richness that you can create within yourself and your life. So it's about really thinking yourself into the reality that you wish to create. And it's such a beautiful, well crafted book. I think it's one of the very first personal development
Yeah.
books ever written, right? If not the first.
Mm.
And it still holds true over 100 years later in terms of the principles that you use to cultivate the person that you wish to become, to create the results that you wish to create and the life that you wish to experience. So that's been a book, and I'm just having a look at my bookcase here, but that's been a book that's really helped me to recraft myself. And then when you start to move forward into, you know, starting to recreate your experience of life. There are other books like Psycho-Cybernetics by Maxwell Maltz, and that's a book about self-image and really having a very clear image in your mind of the version of yourself that you want to create, and then the steps to do that as well.
Wow, that's some great resources. Thank you. And I'll make sure I add all your links in the description as well. Is there anything else while we're on your book and your material that you give? Anything else that you want to touch on that material, Michael, while we're here?
In terms of what I teach?
Yeah.
Yep. Okay. So I would say that the beginning stages of my journey, when I say that, probably the first 3 to 5 years was about really understanding how responsibility can change everything, right? And how when we start to look at what we truly value, and these are core values, when we start to take responsibility, understand that we have limitless potential, and then connect with some really solid anchoring core values. Because when we understand what we truly value, that helps us to make really good quality choices in life as well, anchored by these core values. And then when we couple that with a well-defined purpose for our lives, these are all the things that we do in the Hero's Journey, one of my programs. When we couple that with a well-defined purpose, which is really like, this is my overall purpose for life. This is the thing that I want to be able to lie on my deathbed, surrounded by my loved ones, dying peacefully, hopefully. And I know that this has been the overarching purpose for my life. And I've made the world better just by mere virtue of the fact that I've been here and creating and actualizing this purpose. And when a man has purpose, a really well-defined one, and he's connected with his core values, every moment in life has meaning, right? He doesn't float through life rudderless, if you like. He actually has direction, and there's something that he's headed for, and he has some meaning in his life, and that creates purpose. And when we're purposeful, we start to really connect with what's truly important in each and every moment. So
Wow.
things like this, for instance, right? Gemma, I mean, people, every time I'm asked for an interview, I always say yes. Not because I have abundant amounts of time, because I really don't, but because my purpose in this world is to positively impact the lives of 1 billion men. And so, if I don't say yes to every interview, if I don't say yes to every opportunity to potentially reach more men, then I'm not living purposefully. I'm not trying to actualize my potential in each and every moment, right? And so you couple all of that with self-image, and we all have a self-image, whether it's created unconsciously or consciously. We all have a self-image, right? And we can see our self-image reflected in our results. So the quality of our relationships, the quality of our financial situation, the quality of ourselves, how we wake up in the morning, what we think and what we think about, and what we tell ourselves, and the internal dialogue. So our self-image is there. Whether it serves us or not is a different purpose. And so, there's these fundamental things, core values, well-defined purpose, and self-image that form I would say, the foundations of the hero's journey, which is what we teach. And when you've got these 3 elements and you understand your shadow, which is what Carl Jung calls the unconscious mind, when we can start to integrate some of our shadow aspects, so we're not reactive and we're more responsive in life, which also helps us to emotionally regulate ourselves. When we have these fundamental principles and we start operating from those places, we create a very, very powerful version of ourselves who actually has the potential then to actualize something in the world that creates positive change. And I would say that every man that I've spoken with over the years, they've said to me, wow, Michael, if I can create that, that's almost like the pinnacle of my achievement in life. It's like, yep, it is.
Wow. Well, I've got 2 burning questions now, and they're not related, but I'm going to ask them both so I don't forget them, and we'll just see what direction it goes in. The first one is, so how does a man find his purpose? And the second one is, how does a man emotionally regulate himself?
Oh, great questions. And they're the 2 things that most men struggle with. So the first one around purpose, right? I've constructed a whole process which goes for a whole month in the hero's journey around finding your overarching life's purpose, right? And with that, when you connect with that overarching, well-defined purpose, as I said before, that gives every moment in life meaning, and you're very intentional and conscious about what you're doing moving forward. What we do first, though, is when we start to think about purpose and start to really, start to consider what that could mean for us, the very first thing that we do, which we do in the Knights Code, which is an 8-week program, still live delivered before the hero's journey, is around bringing purpose, not necessarily connecting with an overarching purpose, but bringing purpose to everything that we currently have in life. So most men, when they come to me or us, they say, I hate my job, but I have to do it because if I don't, there's no food on the table, the mortgage doesn't get paid and whatever else. And I'm like, okay, but I hate my job. I resent my job, right? I don't like getting up in the morning. I drag my feet. I get to work. I sit there. I'm miserable all day. And then I go home and I'm exhausted mentally, emotionally, physically. And then I get home and there's kids that want my attention and my wife needs things from me and I've still got to do all those things. And it's like, okay, cool. So there's that. And also by then he's miserable in life. And so he isn't showing up in his intimate relationship very well either. So there's usually relationship problems. And so the very first step towards finding an overarching purpose in life is to find purpose in the mundane, find purpose in the things that we don't like, find purpose in the things that we have felt resentful towards. And it's like everything has a purpose in life. So the very first stages are, what purpose does your job bring? Even though you hate it, you're resentful and you're miserable every day, does it bring you purpose? And it's like we dig a little bit deeper and we go, well, yeah, it actually supports my family. And I love my family and I wouldn't want them to be unsupported or feel unsupported. So it's like, if there's nothing more important to you than your family, then the purpose behind that job is to provide for your family. And so then it's like this renewed sense. You don't have to like the things that you do at work, right? You don't have to always like it. But if you understand and there's this underlying feeling of, all right, well, I love my family. They're my highest purpose in life right now. And so if this brings them provision, then that brings purpose to it for me. And I don't have to be resentful, because if I'm resentful towards the thing that brings provision to my family, then I'm resentful of my family and providing for my family. And I'm not.
It's really as simple as that shift in perspective, isn't it? It's
The
like
beginning,
you
yeah,
use the word purpose, I use the word gratitude. When we can find gratitude, when we can find the gift in everything,
yep,
it's a mental switch that changes and just opens up your life and invites more of purpose or more of gratitude to come in.
yep, yep.
So I love
I
it.
do love gratitude. Like we teach gratitude at the beginning stages of our programs. And so I'm talking about the Knights Code, the Hero's Journey, they're mid-level to high-level programs. And by then we've definitely done gratitude, right? It's such an integral, fundamental part of our experience of life, gratitude. It really is a beautiful thing when you can start to find things to be grateful for. When previously you thought your life was just hell, all of a sudden it opens your consciousness and your awareness to more things in your life that you can be grateful for as well. And all of a sudden you start to feel a little bit more fulfilled, a little bit more happy, and you start to have better quality relationships, because all of a sudden you focused on the good, the gratitude, the positive, instead of the bad, the negative, and the hard, you know?
Oh, definitely, definitely. I always say, even if you've got two legs, you've got more than, some people in the world. There's always something you can find to be grateful for.
Yeah.
I love that what you said about finding the purpose in what you're doing instead of going and looking for the purpose. That's really solid. Is there anything else you'd like to say around purpose, or shall we move on to emotional regulation?
Yeah, I suppose the only other thing I'd like to say around purpose is that it's, from my perspective, and people have different perspectives of this, but I've worked with thousands of men over the years, and I can speak from personal experience as well, is that a man, and there's a quote, a man without purpose is like a ship without a rudder, right? And it really is that. I'm so, like, I will talk about this, if you let me, all day, about purpose and how important it is for a man to connect with a sense of purpose, because if he doesn't find purpose, yep. But I won't talk all day. but if he doesn't, if a man hasn't got a really well-defined sense of purpose in life, he will literally just suffer from shiny object syndrome, or all get to a point, and for those that don't know what shiny object syndrome is, it's the next shiny object. It's the thing that looks good, and we just go to that thing and hope to hell that's the thing that works for us to give us some sense of meaning and fulfillment. And often it's not the case, because it's not connected with our highest values. It's not connected with anything that's actually meaningful. We're just trying to get the next dopamine hit. And so purpose, like that real anchoring, well-defined purpose, when a man has that, the transformation in his whole life is phenomenal. His relationships are so much better. He wakes up every morning. He knows exactly what he's doing, how he's doing it, when he's going to do it, and he feels a sense of achievement every single day towards actualizing his limitless potential towards a well-defined purpose. So it's such a powerful place for a man to be. So I'll stop there, because I could really talk about this all day.
Okay. All right, let's explore emotional regulation, because, yeah, as you said, that is a really significant point. So I'll give you the platform, and what have you got to say about that?
So I can say that I have been incredibly emotionally unregulated in my life, and now incredibly emotionally regulated. And the shift between the two is an ongoing journey of self-awareness, ongoing journey of understanding that how we respond, whether we respond or react, creates an outcome, it creates a result. And everybody wants different results in life, right? Or better results. And so from my perspective, fundamentally, we get better results by learning how to emotionally regulate. So how do we learn how to emotionally regulate when we're conditioned to react, right? When we're conditioned to come from a place of shadow, which is the unconscious mind, which contains everything that we have been programmed to believe about relationships, about money, about life, about people, about ourselves, and about what we have the potential to create. So emotional regulation really comes down to a couple of key factors. It's like, what am I making this mean to me? That's the first one, right? And this is about metacognition, thinking about our thinking as the thoughts are formulating, because when we can do that, then we can catch ourselves in the moment of reactiveness, right? When we can catch ourselves in that moment, we've got this space, which I call the space in between, the space between the stimuli and then the choice, right? And the choice becomes, do I respond or do I react? And a reaction is an automatic thing that comes from the unconscious mind, which is based in the foundations of what we have been conditioned to believe about ourselves and everything around us and our whole experience. And so I was emotionally unregulated because I had this conditioning and this programming around, Michael, you're not good enough. I'm not blaming anyone for this conditioning and programming. It just is there as a result of childhood, growing up, all of the influences in our lives, the experiences that we had. And so I always had this fundamental belief that I wasn't good enough, I wasn't important, and I wasn't heard, right? And so it's actually interesting because a lot of men feel exactly the same way, because growing up in childhood, often we didn't feel heard by our father. You know, we didn't feel approved of by our fathers. We didn't feel validated and good enough, because that generation of men was all about, achievement and security and all that sort of stuff. And so they would push their sons in certain directions that they felt were right for them, because it was the most important thing was you do well in school, you get good marks, you get a good job, and you work your way up through the ranks in the company that you work for to provide for your family. You're not important, your family's important, right? All that's important is providing for your family. And so what that does is it develops these beliefs. If you don't feel that you measure up to those standards, then you don't feel worthy. You don't feel like you are providing at the level at which you could or should. And so that sets up a lot of self-worth stuff for men, right? And so this really drives a lot of men's behavior unconsciously. And then that feeling of not being good enough perpetuates into frustration and anger. And then we start being highly reactive, and we're not emotionally regulated at all in that place. So when we start to bring that down and go, okay, cool, in order for me to start to create better results, I need to take responsibility for myself. I need to start understanding that their beliefs and values, they're actually somebody else's beliefs and values, somebody else's requirements of me. What are my requirements of me? It's such a journey, Gemma. It
Yeah.
really is, because you've got to unpack and decondition yourself, unpack those beliefs, decondition yourself and recondition yourself the way that you want to show up in the world. And that comes back to, what do we want to believe about ourselves? What is our potential? And really understanding that berating ourselves doesn't get us anywhere. You know?
Yeah, that's a
So
tough one.
that process of emotional regulation comes back to really some key fundamental things around, I am worthy. I am, all of these affirmations that we can tell ourselves over and over again, start to recondition our mind, recondition the unconscious, and begin to have the ability to choose reaction or response. It's such a journey, and it's a process that, we probably can't cover the whole process on one podcast episode, but it is definitely a process. And it first comes down to self-responsibility and self-leadership.
Wow. I'd just really like to acknowledge something that touched my heart that you said when you didn't feel important growing up as a man. You were taught to provide and, go out and work, and ultimately you were just a means to an end, I guess. That's and that really hit home, because I can imagine that, that's the predominant feeling in a lot of men. And I just like to acknowledge that. And hopefully we can make that shift and make men feel important, because they are.
Yeah, thank you. It's not unusual for men to come to us and say some variation of, I just feel like a walking wallet. Aside from what I
Yeah.
provide financially, I don't feel like I'm of any purpose whatsoever to anything, anyone, at all, except for what I provide financially.
As a woman, I've seen that from other women. I mean, personally, I've never been materialistic, so I can't identify with that. But what would you say to women who do have that attitude towards men? What does a man feel when a woman is really with him just for the material values he can provide?
Look, I think relationships are a negotiation, and I think it's up to both people, men and women, to set the standard at the very beginning and put forward their, you might say, requirements and what they will and won't tolerate. So I think responsibility lies on the shoulders of men and women in this situation. So, you're talking about very entitled women, who only want to be with a man who might be powerful, wealthy, whatever it might be,
Mm,
or seeking for the man that she's with to become that for her. So
mm,
that's an entitlement. And there's a lot of shadow in that. There's a lot of stuff around that that could, the women could choose to heal from if they wanted to. But part of the responsibility also lies on the shoulders of the man. What
mm,
is he tolerating? Why is he allowing himself to be treated that way? Where is he putting forward his requirements and his standards around how he wants to be treated and how he wants to be respected and looked upon? You know,
mm,
so it's very easy for a man to sit here and say, well, women, you should not be entitled. You should understand that men want to be respected and loved and cared for, just like you do. And, be better at being a partner. You know, go and heal yourself, go and do the work on yourself and understand that, everyone has their place. You want to feel important in the relationship, so does he. Very easy to do that, right? But a little bit more wisdom around that could be, start to renegotiate your relationship. Start to renegotiate your relationship. Come to your partner with, these are what I would like in our relationship, and from you, is that, do you value that too?
mm,
And he might come back and say, no, I don't value money like you do.
mm.
I don't value money like you do. I want to feel a sense of purpose. I want to have meaning to my life. I don't want to be just working my fingers to the bone every single day to pay for BMWs, Lululemon, brunch with the girls, um, eyebrows, eyelashes, lips, nails. I don't know. Pick one, right? For all of them. But there are so many men out there that go, wow, she looks great. But aside from that, there's no
Wow.
intimacy in our relationship. I feel like I'm just a walking wallet. And it's like, well, what are you tolerating? Where have you set the standard? Where have you allowed this? And I'm not saying allowed the woman to do or not do something, but where have you allowed boundaries to be crossed and you to become just the credit card?
Yeah. As a woman, I guess that's sort of, I can relate to that, as in when a man only sees you as a physical body, from
Yep.
the feminine perspective. I'm trying to empathize and imagine what you're feeling, and that's what came to me. So yeah, walking wallet, or just a body for sexual purposes, or whatever. Let's jump back, Michael, to the emotional regularity. Can you give us an example? For example, if something, if it doesn't happen now, we'll go a bit further back. Something that made you feel angry, or if you want to put in another emotion, and the process that you went through to stop yourself reacting and responding, and how did that look for you?
So I think we all get angry, and there are moments when we feel anger coming up, and that happens for me as well. Even now, I'd lie if I didn't say that anger sometimes came up, but it does. And one of the things that helps me to emotionally regulate myself in that moment, but again, like, this is a muscle that you develop over time. It doesn't happen just like that. It's a muscle that gets developed, and because I've consciously developed that muscle, what I can do now is I can feel the anger in my body. Like, everything is somatic before it's a reaction in the world. Everything is somatic. And so you always feel it in your body first. And it can be a feeling of tension. It can be butterflies in your tummy. It can be sweaty palms. It can be anything. I almost say that it's like a fire that starts to build and grow within you before the flames, come out of your mouth and you and you create chaos around you. But I would say that, again, it comes back to that space in between. So you feel the somatic thing happen within you wherever it happens in your body, and it's a really good exercise to do, to start recognizing, where is that? Like, when I get angry, what happens in my body first, right? Is it does my head start pounding? I've heard so many different somatic responses to anger. When you start to feel like my head starts pounding, my palms get sweaty, I feel fire within me, um, you know, whatever it may be for you. So for me, my heart starts to beat a little bit faster, right? And anxiety starts to come up. And I'm like, and I have learned to develop this muscle. So now I can go, okay, I feel that. I feel that. What am I making this mean to me?
Mm.
Right. And that's it. What am I making that mean to me? And instead of projecting and externalizing all of that and going, well, she said this, or he said that, or he did this, or he did that, she did that, it's like, well, if I were to just bring all of that in and go, okay, well, yes, he or she said that, but is that my stuff? Like, what do I need to make that mean to me? Or do I know that person enough to know that there's something there for him or her, and I don't have to make this mean anything to me? Don Miguel Ruiz wrote a great book years ago called The Four Agreements. And one of the agreements is, don't take anything personally, right? And this is, I would say, actually, that's another book that people could read if they wanted to. This is one of the tools that I use all the time to emotionally regulate. Don't take anything personally. That's one of the four agreements. Because when you don't take anything personally, then you don't make anything mean anything, right, anymore. And it doesn't have to be about you. It's actually a very egotistical thing to believe that everything that everyone says or
Yes.
does is all about you, you know?
Yeah.
And often it's not. It's just their own stuff that they haven't healed yet. So there's so much in emotional regulation. But I would say I'm glad that you asked me that question, because The Four Agreements is a great book to start with. It's only a small book, and
It
you can
is,
read it.
easy
You
to
can
read.
you can read it in a couple of hours, really. And if you really start to implement those four agreements into your life, emotional regulation becomes easier, or the path towards it becomes easier. Relationships start to flourish, and you start to get this real sense of peace within you that all is actually okay, and you have the ability to change your experience and your perception and everything in each and every moment if you want to. Or we can choose to continue to live life as a victim of our circumstances, situations, events, and people around us. The choice ultimately becomes ours in each and every moment.
That's right. Yeah, great advice. You touched on the ego. So I'm really interested to explore as a man, what does ego mean to you? And is there healthy ego? Is there unhealthy ego? Does a man need ego? What are your thoughts around that, Michael?
I think ego gets a bad rap. I really do. There's healthy expressions of ego and there's unhealthy expressions of ego. So I would say that, it's very similar, very similar to the difference between confidence and arrogance. Okay, so arrogance says I'm better than you, and confidence says I'm actually quite comfortable in what I believe to be true. Okay, so the expression of ego is almost similar to the difference between confidence and arrogance in terms of healthy expression of ego and unhealthy expression. Expression of ego is essentially, I don't care. I'm going to say and do whatever I want, and I don't care how it affects other people. Right? That's an unhealthy expression of ego. A healthy expression of ego is, I would say, without being egotistical in my response here, but I would say, isn't that ironic? But I would say that a healthy expression of ego would be what you and I have been doing on this podcast, on this interview right now, right? Which is, you're curious, you're asking questions from a place of curiosity, seeking to understand, to add value to the rest of the world, or as many people who may be listening to this as possible. And my healthy expression of ego is taking everything that I've learned over the last 17 years or so and being quite open and confident in my expression and my perspective, and it's not that I don't care what people think of my opinions. It's that I have evidence to prove that what I teach and what I say works for men. And I'm going to share that in a way that is true for me. And what I've seen is true for most men as well. And so I think ego is necessary. Without ego, you wouldn't be doing this. Without ego, I wouldn't be doing what I do. And I think it's actually a good thing.
Yeah, nice
If
one.
we
It's
can,
just
if
that
we can
awareness.
if we can
Always,
regulate our expression of it.
yeah, always coming back to awareness. I love it. Let's jump back to, you did say that you were using alcohol when you were in that deepest, darkest point. And I know we've come ahead, but let's not neglect that chapter. What is your relationship like today with alcohol?
Oh, it's fine. Like, you got to understand, alcohol, drugs, porn, whatever the addiction is that the man chooses in that moment, it's never about the addiction. It's never the addiction that's the problem. It's why we step into that in the first place, right? It's always an underlying thing. So my relationship with to directly answer your question now, my relationship with alcohol is that I'm not an alcoholic, but I also haven't gone to the other extreme where I just don't drink anymore, right? So I love a good glass of Italian or French red wine, or a good whiskey, right? And I don't drink every day, but I'm not averse to having a glass of wine either, or a whiskey. And so it will be birthdays, celebrations, Christmas, Easter, whatever. When we've got a group of people around and we have a bottle of wine there, we'll all have a glass of wine, and it's not a big deal. And my wife and I will open a bottle of wine, I don't know, once a month, once every couple of months or something, and we'll sit there and we'll have a glass of wine and we will have a cheese platter and we'll sit there and we will just talk and connect, right?
Yeah, Italian family.
Absolutely.
Michael, the reason I asked that is because now I wanted to understand the journey from when you said abusing alcohol and drinking it every day up to today. How did you wean yourself off wanting it, needing it every day? Did that happen organically as your life improved, or did you take certain steps?
Yeah. So one of the things as well as alcohol, I was also smoking cigarettes at that time as well, right? So it was in that moment that I thought, over the next week, I would say, so I stopped drinking so heavily. Once I went to the real estate agent and then got my job back, I stopped drinking. I thought, I'm not touching that anymore ever again, right? In that moment. So it was definitely a shift to the other direction, where it was like, I'm not ever drinking alcohol again. Look what it did to me. And it was only on my journey over the next 3 to 6, maybe into the next 12 months, I realized it was never alcohol that was the problem. It was
Mm.
my choice around how much alcohol I was drinking and why, right? And this comes back to responsibility, because it's never the gun that kills the person, it's the person pulling the trigger. It's never the bottle of alcohol that makes the person drunk. It's the choice how much
Mm.
alcohol we drink. It's never the cigarettes that cause lung cancer. It's how much we smoke and how long we smoke for, and whether we smoke at all. So we got to think about these things. And we always, when we blame alcohol for our problems, we're externalizing responsibility. We're externalizing. It's almost like we've got this bottle of wine there and we're going, you have caused so many problems in my life. It's like,
Yeah.
and the bottle of wine's going, hang on a second, you haven't even opened me yet. I haven't done anything. I'm just sitting here on the table, right? And so we've got to start to put these things into perspective. So my relationship with alcohol over the years, I don't see alcohol as a bad thing. I
Mm.
don't see wine as a bad thing, or beer as a
Yeah.
bad thing. I don't see whiskey or spirits as a bad thing. It's like what we do with it. It's like anything in life. What choice do we make? What do we do with the thing that's presented in front of us? What are the choices that we make? And are they healthy choices that serve us, or are they unhealthy choices that create undesirable results? So, and it was the same with cigarettes. I mean, I just went cold turkey with cigarettes about 2 or 3 days after that experience that I explained that
Wow.
Sunday morning, because you kind of get to a point where I looked at my life and I'm like, okay, what else can I start to change?
Yeah.
So I cleaned up my house. I got my job back. I had some extra grace period with my rent. And it's like, what else? How else can I change my life for the better? It's like,
Mm.
well, I don't need to smoke. The first few days were horrible quitting
Mhm.
smoking, but after that, not bad. And now, 17 years later, I'm not interested.
Yeah, yeah. That's impressive that you could do that cold turkey, because not a lot of people can. And I'm sure that with your experience helping men, you've seen that plenty of times. Have you got
It's
any
all in the
advice to
mind.
offer men who can't go cold turkey and, keep maybe yo-yoing back and forth? What's the strategy that seems to work?
Yep, we can all go cold turkey.
You can just
There's
do it.
nothing there's nothing stop. Well, it's easy to say just do it, right? But yes, it is about that. But it's definitely a mindset shift. It's definitely a shift. It's
Okay.
like it's the same as our results in life. It's like we do a bit of here's something that we can do, right? We can go, all right, you can get a piece of paper, write a line down the middle. These are the things that serve me, these are the things that don't serve me, right? And you write down all the things that don't serve you, all the things that do serve you in life, all the choices that you make, all the behaviors you engage in, all the things that you do, the thoughts that you think, the feelings that you give power to, whether you're reactive or responsive in life, like what serves me and what doesn't. Write them down, put them on a piece of paper in black and white. And it's
Right.
like the things that serve you, that's good. Keep doing more of them. The things that don't serve you right now, start ticking them off the list and start removing them from your life one by one, the things that don't serve you, or find ways of transforming the experience so that you can put them into the other column. And I
Mm.
just I just did a very simple exercise like that back in the day. And it's like I looked at smoking as like all my behaviors, and it's like, does this serve me? And it's like, no, it doesn't actually serve me at all. What it does is I started to believe that it calmed me, right? That a cigarette and a coffee, like you just think about
Yeah.
that for a second, right? They're both stimulants. So a stimulant is not going to calm you in any way. But it's about it's again, what do we believe about something, you know?
Mm.
So I believe that by having a cigarette, I would feel calm and my problems would be lessened. And in fact, that's not the case at all. The problems are still there. And in fact, the stimulant that we're putting into our body actually um, actually elevates anxiety and makes the problem even bigger in our own minds than it actually is. So it's like that doesn't serve me. So cold turkey, it's a mindset shift.
Mm. Love it. Would you agree that when we start honoring and respecting our physical body, more doors open up and life honors and respects us more?
Yes, yes, and yes, I would agree with that, and that speaks into The universe matches our energy. The universe will match our input with its input as well. And so when we start respecting our body, our bodies, then the universe provides us more input or opportunities for us to do that at a higher level. And how that works in reality, in practicality, is that when you stop smoking, when you stop drinking so much, when you eat well, when you actually move your body, guess what? You're going to start to feel better, right? You'll just feel better physically. You'll have a higher sense of vitality in life. You'll have more energy, and that motivates you to want to do more of the thing that makes you feel that way.
Yeah, for sure. What does the word freedom mean to you, Michael?
Freedom for me is doing what I want, when I want, with whom I want, with no restrictions and no limitations, and being able to live a life where I can literally choose. I have the power of choice, right? That's freedom to me. I have no desire to sit on a beach forever, endlessly. I have no desire to do nothing in my life, but freedom for me means living the life that I'm living, doing the thing that is connected with my purpose, and continuing to self-actualize myself in each and every moment, and having the ability to do that.
So just choosing every day, re-choosing your purpose, your family, your healthy lifestyle, just a matter of having that choice instead of, oh, I have to go to work because I have to pay the bills. It's a choice. You've created a life that you choose, and you continue to choose instead of life choosing you. Again, it's shifting out of that victim status into one of empowerment.
Yeah, I absolutely agree with that. Each and every
Oh,
moment we have a choice. Each and every moment we have a choice to continue to choose the experience that we're having, which doesn't serve us, or to choose a different way of being in order to create results that do serve us. So I can speak into this with some wisdom, I think, because I spent the first 32 years of my life as a victim of everything around me. I would blame and find everything was someone else's fault, Gemma. Every job that I lost was my employer or whatever it was. Every relationship or friendship that didn't work, it was his or her fault. Everything that went wrong in my life was someone else's fault, and it was someone else to blame, right? I spent so many years as a victim that when you shift that into a different way of thinking, a different way of being, and take responsibility for your experience of life and your results, everything changes.
okay. So if you were to stand in front of that younger version of you now, the one that you just shared with us, what are you going to say to him? What tools and practices are you going to share with him from the other side to kick him into moving on his journey?
I'm often asked this question, Gemma, and the answer is, if I stood in front of if me now stood in front of a past version of myself and said, you need to do A, B, C, and D, because if you don't, this is going to be your experience over the next 15, 20 years, and that's not good, I would not have listened.
Yeah.
Okay. Because I wasn't at the level of awareness to have accepted any of that. So it's very easy to go, I often get asked this question, what would you say to your previous version of yourself, And I'm like, I could have said anything. He wouldn't have listened because he was so arrogant and egotistical, unhealthy expression of ego, and so arrogant that it's like, go away. Like I know what I'm doing.
Yeah.
It's my ex-wife's fault. It's my employer's fault. It's that person's fault. It's his. So until you're at the level of awareness to accept that next level of responsibility, which comes with experience and continuing to get more and more evidence along the way that what you're doing doesn't work, you have to get to a point. There has to be a catalyst in life before you will listen, before you will see that what you're doing actually doesn't serve, and you need to be different, embody something different in order to create different results. So we can all go back to a previous version of ourselves and give ourselves a letter, stand in front of our previous selves and say, this is what you need to do, or why don't you choose that instead? But ultimately that person is going to make the same choice because that's their level of awareness then.
Yeah. Yeah, that's really good. I mean, ultimately, the the pain has to be so great that we want to change. Do you agree?
Absolutely. The pain of staying the same has to be worse than the pain of change before we will make any sort of choice to do something different.
Wow. Let's touch on, you spoke of your 3 core values.
Yep.
Yeah. What's the first one?
In no particular order, but service, contribution, and purpose. And so, yep. So they're my 3
So
core
we've
values.
spoken about that. Is there anything else you want to add to that?
The only thing I will add to that is that my 3 core values, as with every man who goes through our programs and develops their own core values, when they approach life after they have cultivated these core values within them or chosen their core values or connected with their core values, choices become so much better and easier, and the way we live our lives becomes different because then every choice that we make about a thought that we focus on, a feeling that we choose, an action that we create in life, or a behavior or an outcome that we want to create always comes back to these 3 core values. So if I were to just unpack these very quickly, my own core values, if I'm not being of, so I will make choices based on this. If I do that thing, is it of service to somebody else? Will it contribute to the greater good? And is it connected with my well-defined purpose? And if it is, if I can tick off all 3 of those core value boxes, then I'll do the thing. If it's not, then I won't. And this is about the boundaries that we set for ourselves, what we will and won't tolerate, whether we're intentionally, consciously purposeful about the things that we do, and the choices that we make. It all comes back to these 3 core values combined with our well-defined purpose and the self-image of ourselves that we create. So it's not about the core values in isolation. It's core values, well-defined purpose, self-image. So if the choice that we're making is in alignment with all 3 and it's congruent, then you do the thing. If it's not, then you don't do the thing. And so what you find is that as I said before, whilst I say yes to every interview that I'm asked to be on, that's because it's in total congruence, my core values, my well-defined purpose, and my self-image. Because every time I do an interview, I actualize more of who I have the potential to become because the message gets out there, and I guess cultivate the message and articulate it in a better way. The more practice you get, it's well and truly aligned with my well-defined purpose because I want to positively impact the lives of 1 billion men around the world. It's of service to you and your listeners. It contributes to the world, and it's connected with my purpose. So this is how they're all intermingled and fused together. Create a fusion of all of that, and you're very intentional about how you show up in life.
Michael, your awareness and wisdom in all those areas of life that we've covered is immense. Would you say you had the same expansion in relating with women and understanding the feminine?
Would I say that I have the same wisdom? I think the answer is no. And the reason why is because I'm not a woman. And because I'm not a woman, I don't have the experience of being a woman, right? So that's the easy surface answer to that, right? But when you go a little bit deeper, it's like even though I'm not a woman and you're not a man, we can relate in some way because we're all human beings, and we actually have similarities, but also differences. But the similarities, there's more similarities than there are differences. And the intricacies of the differences create a very unique experience. And so this is why I can relate to women, but I can't relate to women at the same level as what I can to men. But I can certainly relate to the experience of being a human being, having a spiritual experience in the world, and some of the struggles that women face, some of the struggles that men face. But this is why I do what I do with men, because I'm a man and I can relate to the experience of being a man and what that means in the world as well. But I would say that I'm also a relationship coach, and I've been doing that for about 10 years as well. So I've learned a lot about women and what they like and what they require in relationships, let's say. And so women fundamentally want security, safety, and stability. And not that it's all on the man to provide that, because that's an internal feeling. We have to create our own safety, security, and stability. But definitely there's an element there of, whilst women are not vulnerable victims, maidens in distress, whatever you want to call them, right? Women are not that way. Most women definitely want a partner who can provide, protect, preside, lead, and be very powerful in that, you know? So, yeah, I hope that answers your question.
Yeah, I'm sorry, I probably wasn't particularly clear on that question. So, but I was just hoping to understand what, if you had any wisdom for men who are struggling with their relationships with women, like something fundamental that you've learned in the last, say, 17 years that might help them understand women a bit better.
Okay, so as I said, women fundamentally, generally, it's a generalization, but women generally want security, stability, and safety within relationship with a man, right? Emotionally, physically, mentally, spiritually, safety, security, and stability across all those things, right?
Yeah.
And some men say, well, that's a lot to provide, right? It's like, it actually isn't. When you think about it, if you do the work on yourself and you're grounded and you are connected with yourself, then naturally you're going to show up in a well-rounded way in a relationship as well. So, and I would say as well that all relationships are an ongoing process of evolution and negotiation. And so if you can enter into good quality negotiation, not trying to win, but trying to find some, and not compromising yourself either. Men and women shouldn't compromise. But what we do want to do is find some place where both people get their needs met, but both people are valued and honored as well.
Yeah.
And so setting those standards at the very beginning, communicating what you will and won't tolerate, and having some really healthy boundaries around all of that, and being powerful and strong enough within yourself to say, this is what I will and won't tolerate. This is what we've negotiated. This is what we've agreed upon. If we get to a point where those things are not honored on an ongoing basis and change isn't happening, then I need to be powerful and strong enough in myself to say, this relationship doesn't serve me anymore, right? No threats, no ultimatums, just powerful within yourself to go, this doesn't serve me anymore and I'm going to move on. Or being able to sit down and have a good quality conversation with your partner from a place of respect, love, connection, with an attitude of resolution, right? So I would say that, and most people don't negotiate their relationships at the beginning. They're in the honeymoon phase. They're putting their best foot forward. They're trying to impress the other person because there's an attractive, there's a desire there or attractiveness there. And so they want to feel loved and worthy and accepted by that other person. So they'll put their best foot forward. What people don't often do is have that really good quality discussion around, okay, cool, we like each other. That's there. And we know that there could be something there as well. So before we go any further, let's have this really good conversation, this good quality conversation around, this is what I value the most. This is what I will and won't tolerate. This is my vision of the future with someone. Does that match with you or not? And it's like, then the other person's got to be strong enough to say, that does, but that doesn't. And this is how I feel about that. Right?
Yeah.
Right. And then negotiate. And if you haven't done that, it's never too late to get together with your partner, glass of wine, if you're not an alcoholic, glass of wine and a cheese platter, and go, or something like that. Go out and create time and space, go away for the weekend, have that really good quality discussion around requirements, what you will and won't tolerate, boundaries, the vision of the future. Make sure you're aligned and congruent with each other. And if you're not, find ways of, if you want to, find ways of getting that congruency, finding that connection. So it's never too late to do that. But I suppose what I am saying is people have to get better at doing that at the beginning of relationships, and then having boundaries around setting the standards of enforcing those boundaries too, so that we have a much better experience of relationships, because things are usually good for the first 6 months and then the cracks start to show, and the cracks are only there because we haven't set the standard at the very beginning.
We're going to wrap up soon, Michael. But before I give you the open platform at the end, just to touch that, if a man is struggling with his relationships, what external resources would you recommend that he, if he's looking for some external help, what would you recommend?
Purely in the context of relationships, I would say go and look at Esther Perel's work. She's amazing, Esther Perel. She's a French lady, and I think she lives in America, and she's a relationship coach, for use of a better term.
Where can they find her?
Oh, YouTube, anywhere.
Okay.
So just to Esther Perel, Esther, Perel, Perel. She's amazing. So go and watch her stuff, and you will get some really good quality wisdom around some of the changes that you could choose to make in relationships, in your relationship. Another thing that you could do, and it's really powerful for a man to do this, go and look at the 5 love languages. There's a book, and there's also a website. These are very, very simple things, right? Just to start the process. And it's like, go look at the 5 love languages, go to your partner and say, hey, I found this thing. I'd really love to love you better. I'd love to express my love to you in a way that you might recognize and appreciate, you know, and in a way that I know you will value. Because often what we do in relationships is we express love in our own love language, and the other person may not recognize that as an expression of love.
Yeah.
So, you know, a lot of men might buy gifts for their partner, flowers, chocolates, and all the rest of it, right? But ultimately what they're not doing in relationship is they're not delivering on their commitments, right? And a woman might say, well, thanks for the chocolates. Yeah. Thanks for the flowers. Now, I'd really love for you to go and do the things that you said you do, which you haven't done, right? Yeah. But and that's an act of service, right? So her love language might be acts of service, but you're showing her love languages in gift. You're showing her love in gift giving or some other thing. So go get that, do the test online and say to your partner, I've done this test. I'd love to get your results as well, because I want to love you better. You know, if a man goes to his wife or partner and says, I want to love you better, can you do this thing for 5 minutes, please, so that I can love you better? She's not going to say no, is she?
Oh, I love that. And that book, I read it years ago now, but it is really powerful and such a simple idea, but so powerful. But because, as you said, we naturally love other people in our own love language. But, you know, as you said, there's the 5 different ones. That's a great book for people to read. So, Michael, we're going to wrap up now, and you have the platform for any other wisdom, insights, experience, links, anything that you would like to share.
Oh, thank you, Gemma. That's lovely. So I think I gave you all of the links. So I'm sure they'll be in the comments or whatever, wherever you post this. But in terms of anything else that I'd like to share, I think, you know, back in the day, Socrates said it really well. Very simple, right? The beginning stages of wisdom is to know thyself. And so and I think overarching everything that we've spoken about, it's that willingness to want to step deeply into the exploration of self that will create a version of you that can be a lot more loving, a lot more caring, a lot more respectful, a lot more purposeful, and will take a lot more responsibility in life and create different results. So in every opportunity that you have to self-actualize, and that means moving towards your limitless potential, then you should grab hold of that with both hands and go with it.
Amazing. Love it. Love it. Oh, you've been such a wealth of wisdom and knowledge, and all from your own personal experience. And, you know, that's the most powerful, isn't it? When we can share our truth and we know it's worked for us. And that's just the best wealth to be able to share with the world.
Oh, thank you, Gemma. It's been a really good experience today, so I really appreciate you. Thank you.
Oh, thank you so much, Michael. All the best, and I'm sure we'll be seeing you around a lot more.
Thanks, Gemma.
All right. Thank you, Michael.
Thank you.
Bye-bye. Bye, everyone. Oh, I've just got to stop there.